the less aesthetically pleasing it looks, the better it will perform. I think actually every newsroom, whether they acknowledge it or not, is value driven. The choice to cover something or not cover something, the choice to use a word in a headline or not, is a statement on your values and your mission. And so we are just more transparent about it. Our editorial voices are our digital voices. It's a lot easier in this country to be a conservative, a lot easier to not try to solve problems. We really pioneered, I think, the TikTok content strategy that many newsrooms are using today. We monitor Twitter all day long and use that as our assignment editor. His team has learned the lessons of a brand. You can accomplish a great deal with a very small team.
Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of Hello Merge Tag, a podcast about social media, politics, and where they intersect. We check in with candidates, consultants, strategists, and more to find out what's working and what's not in the political digital world. I'm your host, Josh Clemens of Reverbal Communications. We help progressive campaigns and organizations win the internet. Have questions you want answered on the pod? Have a guest or topic recommendation? Just want to say hey? Drop us a line at hello@reverbalcommunications.com. Find all episodes at hellomergetag.com or wherever you stream podcasts. Now let's dive in. Look out, Facebook. Now you can drive website visits directly from CivicShout. Introducing Express CPC, CivicShout's new cost-per-click ad system. Everyone already knows that CivicShout's the best way to grow your opt-in email list. Folks like M&R, Greenpeace, and Feeding America stand by it. So can you. Grow your list and run traffic campaigns that hit so hard, your team will wonder how you did it. Environmental Action called CivicShout a wildly better way to grow your email list. And Clarify Agency saw a 200% return on ad spend in just 2 months. CivicShout, the ad platform for progressive causes. Head to civicshout.com/partners to learn more. That's civicshout.com/partners. R.C. Mezzo is a Democratic digital strategist with a decade of experience building influential online brands that connect with voters where they are. As Vice President of Brand and Social at Courier, he led the 2023 launch of Courier Newsroom, a social-first progressive newsroom that quickly became the fastest-growing news brand in the country, reaching audiences of over 100 million people each week and racking up more than 3 billion views throughout the 2024 election cycle. Fun fact, during the 2024 election, I teamed up with Courier as the lead writer, researcher on the FYP, a weekly newsletter spotlighting top political content, creators, and trends on TikTok heading into the 2024 election. Despite both of us being involved in the project, we've never had a chance to connect until today. So I figured it was long past time to rectify that. And I'm excited to talk with him about a topic we're both so enamored with, content. This conversation is particularly timely. Earlier this month, a major report found social media has, for the first time ever, overtaken TV as America's top news source. The right wing has been investing in online creators for a generation, building powerful narrative pipelines. The left, by contrast, has lagged behind. Courier Newsroom has emerged as our leading response, driving shareable, social-first content made for group chats and feeds, and building a progressive voice that resonates online. So, RC, thank you so much for joining me today. You helped launch Courier Newsroom in 2023, and rapidly scaled it to becoming a top digital news platform. Can you walk us through your role in that launch and how y'all thought about and approached building the social-first content machine that y'all ultimately built?
Certainly. Well, first, it's great to be here and good to connect with you and see your face and off of me.
Right.
Could you imagine where we'd be if we did launch it in '03?
Oh man,
we'd be in much better shape today. So we decided in 2023 actually to launch our national newsroom kind of as a marketing effort for the broader organization, which is a network of state-based newsrooms in swing states across the country. They're in all the swing states you can mention: Iowa, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. And they all have their own unique brands. And so what we found was that is challenging to talk about because they were all individually based in their states. And so we wanted to draw more attention to Courier as an organization and its mission. And so we decided we would create a newsroom for national kind of left of center progressives and get them bought in on the process of what Courier is. And then we would then build a bridge between the national brand to the local. And so that was what we started out, the problem we started out to solve. We created a whole new problem because our project took off. Our project became, as you said in your intro, one of the fastest growing news brands in the country. And so the new problem was when people heard of Courier, they just expected to see left of center progressive content on Instagram. And TikTok, and increasingly Facebook. And so that's where we are today. We really, like you said, racked up 3 billion views over the course of the 2024 presidential election. One of the few brands, I think, that really contributed to the online discourse throughout that election cycle. There was a lot of, outside factors, including a historic switch in presidential candidate, and Donald Trump deciding to rerun. And so we built a team that could capture all of that momentum and translate it to an audience online. And I think we're proud to have built it and continue to sustain it today.
I mean, I definitely think you've built it, and you certainly seem to be sustaining it. It's been fun to watch. I mean, I definitely use y'all as an example of like somebody on the left doing it right. Y'all are openly values driven and social first. So how do you approach content knowing that you've got like an angle, if you will?
Sure.
Do you find that being values driven when creating content for your audience makes it easier or harder?
Sure. Well, I'll start with, I think actually every newsroom, whether they acknowledge it or not, is values driven. The choice to cover something or not cover something, the choice to use a word in a headline or not, is a statement on your values and your mission. And so we are just more transparent about it than, say, the New York Times. Right. Every time they choose to assign a reporter to a story, that's a value judgment right then and there. So I think we're more transparent in some ways. Could you repeat your question?
Oh yeah. Do you find that trying to like approaching things openly progressive, does that make it easier or harder for y'all to figure out the angle on the story? Like, are you trying to like not step on your own feet, or is it like, oh, we know exactly how to approach this story this time?
No, because we're mission-based and values-driven, it is increasingly easier to choose what to cover and how to cover it. Because we don't have to seek out an alternative argument to make sure that the story is balanced. We don't have to, twist ourselves into a pretzel when Democrats say it's raining and Republicans say it's not. Right. We can call balls and strikes. And so, more newsrooms, I think, should kind of take this approach because it is infinitely easier. And also, I think our audience rewards us for it because they know we're not bullshitting them. We're calling balls and strikes. We're giving it to them like it is. Believe it or not, we actually don't put that much editorial spin on our social content. For example, you take a scroll through our accounts on Instagram or TikTok, there's not a big editorial spin. Occasionally a headline is a bit punchy or there's a cheeky emoji in a caption, but by and large, we're presenting a raw clip, not edited with some kind of magic. It is more or less a clip of a Republican on a committee talking for 90 seconds. Mm-hmm. Take it what you will. Occasionally we'll have a headline explaining what it is, and maybe that has a tint on it, but you'll see in our comments that our comments often have nothing to do with our editorial overview or spin on it. And it's just people consuming the media in a platform that they're engaged on and responding and reacting to other members of our audience in a meaningful way. And isn't that what news is about?
Absolutely. So on that front, like, so when I was working on the FYP, one outlet that kept coming up almost to the point where we had to like self-censor, like how much we covered them, was the Daily Mail. Like they were just crushing TikTok, but so much of what they were doing was chasing that moment without any concern for the context of the story. And I'll go ahead and just say outright, I think y'all do a really good job of giving us the juicy moment, but also the context, whereas they don't care at all about the context. Somebody makes a flub, they're going to share it, and like they just care about eyeballs. But I am curious, like how much do you weigh like the 90-second clip, if it's not summative, is that even a word, of the larger conversation? Do you try to like make sure you're getting the full story, or you're like, no, this 90 seconds is newsworthy, let's focus on that? And I'm curious, like, where's the line?
Yeah, the Daily Mail is a good example, and it's one of the reasons I'm like, if you look at leaderboards of online content from news brands or individuals, Courier consistently ranks in the top 10, usually the top 5 on daily content, sometimes the top 2. And so the leader is usually Daily Mail. And so, so that means we're slowing down the process a bit, slower than Daily Mail, but rapidly quicker than other newsrooms. And still being rewarded by our audience for adding that context, for taking an extra beat to really understand, if you're coming at this clip with no prior knowledge, can you understand what's happening? And can you then share it with your community and know that you're a resource for them? And so that's something that's important to us, and it's something we always weigh. We don't usually jump on the clip just because it's a clip, and we always try to add the context either in the caption or with an on-screen presenter or with the headline at the top of the card. One thing that we, I think, pioneered in 2024 is headline style clips on TikTok. And what that usually looks like is a horizontal video, sometimes vertical, with a headline at the top that's added right in app. We do less of that now because the platform has changed. But in 2024, this was the bread and butter of Courier. This is what made us took off. I think we pioneered the approach and have seen, numerous brands from legacy media to upstart progressive candidates use the same kind of format. And the reason we did that is because we found you can't just give people a video like the Daily Mail does and expect them to consume it and know what it means. You need to contextualize it either for a local community like they do on our state side, or for a progressive community or left of center or even right of center. And so that context is super important. And I think it's how we've been able to build trust with our audience.
Yeah. No, interesting. What do you think it means for newsrooms, like traditional newsrooms, that more people now get their news from social media than from TV? Like, do you think that all of these legacy media institutions are going to change their approach, or like, are they all like struggling to do it? And like, clearly, have we seen the best CNN can be at digital, or are they still learning? Do you see them improving day to day?
I don't think we've seen the best anybody can be at digital, Courier included.
Okay.
This is a challenge that I think legacy media has been trying to solve for a long time. I started at Courier as our communications and marketing director, and so it was my job to get earned media for Courier, and often that meant at the expense of legacy media. And so I've spent a good amount of my time here thinking about this challenge. And so I don't think that we've seen a good example of legacy media embracing this new digital space. I think the Washington Post is a good example of somebody that really gave it an earnest effort. But Courier dwarfs the Washington Post in size and engagement week over week, year over year. And so I don't think we have. And I don't know how they can solve that problem. One thing that we do here at Courier is our editorial voices are our digital voices. There is no delineation between a reporter and a content creator. They're one and the same. I lead a digital operation here on our national team. I also lead our editorial operation on that. And so because there is no delineation between the two, it means we can make digital choices that inform our editorial choices, and we can make editorial choices that inform our digital choices. They're not two separate teams. One team doesn't produce content and then delivers it to the other team. It's one and the same. It's seamless. And I think that's probably the model that legacy newsrooms need to be thinking more about. And they're behemoths, so it's a harder challenge for them to solve, but it's one that they need to look at closely.
That's really interesting. And the Washington Post example, like, I love what Dave is doing with the Washington Post TikTok, but it's a really good deviation. Like, he's not involved in the day-to-day of the Washington Post. It's his job to figure out, how do I make Washington Post stories interesting on the internet? Whereas you are saying, how can we create content that will be interesting, period, both on the internet and anywhere else? He is having to like work backwards where y'all are working forward. And I think that's a pretty interesting deviation. I never put that together, that like, I love his content. I think he does a phenomenal job. He being the one guy who does it at the Washington Post.
And that's the point, right? When you say Dave, like, you immediately knew who I was talking about, and you've been saying he. And so we are talking about a specific person. And so when he decides to, fold up his briefcase and move on, what's left of the Washington Post's online presence on TikTok? I don't know. We don't have that problem at Courier. If I pack up my bag and leave, we built a digital brand that is basically faceless, and faceless in the way that we have tons of faces. There's not one person that makes the Courier brand. And so we're flexible. Yeah.
No, it's a really interesting distinction. Again, I follow all this closely, and intrinsically, maybe I knew that, but I've never really put words to it. So I think that's a really helpful way, and probably a really good lesson. Obviously less so for campaigns, but certainly for organizations who are like putting all their eggs into a single person's basket. Like, you are now at that person's whim in a dangerous way if that person, retires or heads to Substack, which everyone seems to head to eventually.
But for Dave, though, he's got a great bargaining chip.
Oh, he's crushing it. Yeah, no, I'm a big fan. The right has obviously been building creator-led narrative networks for years. how do you think, like, why do you think the left has lagged? Obviously, like, y'all started in 2023, not 2003. So, like, why do you think we've lagged, and what do you think it's going to take on that right wing propaganda machine online when they have money, resources, and literally no shame? They have no problem manipulating quotes. They have no problem like lying to their audience. How do we combat that? And I think like the short answer is, well, look at what you're doing. But like, do you have thoughts on how the rest of the industry, like the progressive media, can like join you in this generational battle to like bring truth back to reporting?
Sure. Before I get into that, I want to offer one point of clarification. So Courier's national brand, the brand that most people are familiar with, the black and yellow brand on social, launched in 2023. Courier's larger organization launched 6 years ago this Saturday. And so we've been around for a little while. So I
love Up North News. I've been reading Up North News for years. When I say Courier, sorry, yes, I do mean the national brand as opposed to local brands, which we'll talk about in a bit. But thank you for clarifying, for sure.
Yeah. On the question on the right, they have been thinking about this for a long time. They have built these ecosystems. Ben Shapiro has built a behemoth of a brand. Charlie Kirk, Turning Point USA. They have been doing this work for a very long time. And in many ways, progressives are kind of just starting. And so while we should have started, a decade or more ago, I'm glad to see that effort is going on. One challenge, I think, after the 2024 election, everybody, has their own diagnosis. And one of the popular ones that we're still hearing today is the Joe Rogan of the left. I mean, it's now become a caricature.
Right.
It never really meant we're going to find a Joe Rogan on the left. It just meant that he was a stand-in for we're losing this new media podcast, for example, or YouTube. Sure. And so I think one of the issues is we are trying to solve this problem from inside of our party infrastructure, from inside of our progressive left of center campaign political apparatus, instead of trying to solve this outside of politics. One thing that the right has done, one thing that Joe Rogan has done, and I don't mean to associate the right with Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan has a lot of fans on the right, but he did not start out as a right-wing content creator. Theo Vaughn is not a right-wing content creator. The biggest names in podcasts are not right-wing content creators, aside from the ones that are expressly so.
Right.
And so what they've done is they've created these cultural institutions that, for one reason or another, speak to folks on the right or with more conservative tendencies. What we've not done on the left is identify, support, and foster creators of an apolitical nature who, when they get political, probably would fall on the left. We've not done it. We've not built an infrastructure for that. We've not lifted up those voices. We're starting to do so. And we're starting to do so in cheeky ways of like, we lift up these creators, and then come October for an election year, we're like, okay, let's talk about, let's have Kamala Harris on. And so they have a sustained approach, whereas we're kind of piecemealing this thing together in a Frankenstein kind of way. So that's the one piece of it. The second thing, to your point about they don't care what they're talking about, they don't care if it's correct, they don't care if it's accurate, they're just making content to make content. It's a lot easier in this country to be a conservative. It's a lot easier to not care about the truth. It's a lot easier it's a lot easier to not try to solve problems. And so it's a lot harder to be left of center. It's a lot harder to be a progressive. And that means it's a lot harder to message, and it's a lot harder to sell people on your message. And so our challenge, I think, is compounded because we care about all of those things. We care about being accurate. We care about being truthful. We care about informing and turning out voters. And so we have our problem is of a greater scale than when the right was starting. And so I think that's important to realize, is that there's a lot of good people doing this work, and it's not an easy switch that we can flip. But I think lots of organizations are starting to do this work. Lots of organizations, including Courier, are investing in personalities and voices that are not necessarily, politically engaged or progressive, but are just interesting people to listen to that maybe, when it comes time, will fall on left of center or more progressive political ideologies.
Yeah, I'm actually my next scheduled interview is with one of those such people who is not political, but occasionally brings her values into what she does. She's got a huge following in the gardening space, and again, I'll be talking to her next time. But like, I was framing the conversation that I want to have with her because again, she was like, "Wait, why do you want to talk to me for a political podcast?" But like, there isn't a Joe Rogan of the left. What there is a whole bunch of progressives that I said, like, why are when I was chatting with her, I said, why are people in your area, like elected officials, not calling you and asking to come like be in your content? Like, like we don't need to be on Joe Rogan's great. He's got a huge audience, whatever. But like, there's a million smaller audiences out there that are still extremely important. And this is a person who's not political, but like leads with values. And like, we absolutely should be fostering these people and finding ways to promote them and support them. And so, yeah, it's very, I'm curious, do you see your biggest competitors like CNN and the Daily Mail, or do you see like Midas Touch and Occupy Democrats? Like, who do you look to as like the people in your space? For me, it's you and Crooked. But I'm curious, like, who else is doing it in that sort of the scale and with the kind of backing that y'all, like backing is like staff that y'all have?
Yeah, I don't think we rarely use terms like competitors.
Sure.
Especially being mission aligned. You know, we partner with many of the brands you mentioned every single day.
I see y'all on Instagram with the follow from all the groups. So I know it's not like competition, but like who are you looking to for like inspiration from your side? Let's put it that way.
Sure. Yeah, I think all of those brands that you mentioned, Now This, Crooked, Midas Touch, the Bulwark, they're all doing things in interesting and smart ways. They're great storytellers, and you can see in our content that we collab on example on Instagram. We're collab kings on Instagram. Every post that goes out the door has another collaborator on it, and that's the way rising tides lifts all boats. And so that's one of the things that we implemented in 2024 and continue to do so now. But I think one thing that we're looking at is the success of Midas, for example. They've created a news network on YouTube and Substack based on personalities, based on breaking news that is driving meaningful conversation on the left. So what we're trying to do is take inspiration from that on some of our YouTube content, but we're diversifying outside of politics. So, for example, we've launched a show called How Is This Better with Akilah Hughes, one of Crooked's alums. She was the inaugural host of What a Day. And so Akilah is trying to answer the question of how is this better in a cheeky way, of course, all of these things that have been promised to us to improve have generally gotten worse, whether we're talking about air travel or technology, AI, whatever. And some of it reads political, but much of it doesn't. And so that's one show that we've launched. Another one that we're working on is a pop culture show to talk about reality TV and have a space for that. And so we're trying to find and identify these voices that we can lift up in interesting spaces that don't necessarily read political, but could contribute to an overall strategy that reaches people in interesting ways with generally progressive messengers and generally progressive values.
So you talked about content that was working really well a year ago, maybe not as much now. I am very curious because obviously like my audience wants to, like this audience wants to learn. How can they do what you're doing even if it's at a micro scale? So what types of content are you finding perform best these days? And how does that deviate by platform? And if you've got like different strategies for different platforms, I'd love to hear it. I think sometimes, especially small campaigns, it's like they have one piece of content. How can we share this everywhere? Y'all seem to do that some, but not always. Like there are definitely times where you're taking different approaches. So I'd love to hear what's working and how do you approach the different platforms differently?
Yeah, certainly. In 2023, when we launched our national brand, we had a TikTok account. I think it had, I don't know, like 15,000 zombie followers from previous years.
Got it.
That followed over the years for one reason or another. So basically, for all intents and purposes, we were starting at zero.
Okay.
And so we decided to follow the conventional wisdom on that platform, which was it is presenter led. It should be a personality. It shouldn't be a brand. And so we tried to do that. And one thing we learned is if you are a brand and you're purporting to be a brand, like, we're not named Joe Smith, we're named Courier Newsroom. People expect a bit more out of a brand than they would out of, an average creator on the platform. And so once we started to acknowledge that and realize that we can't follow the same set of rules that that other TikTok creators are following. We have to really write our own. And since at that time there was really no other news brands on the platform in a meaningful way,
Sure.
that we kind of had to pioneer it ourselves. And so what we did is we realized that our audience, that because we're a brand, they expected a little bit more. And that meant we could put more branding on our videos. It meant we could have less presenter-led videos, which meant we could move faster, which meant we could put clips up there without commentary. And so we really pioneered, I think, the TikTok content strategy that many newsrooms are using today, which is occasional, maybe 10% presenter-led content or explainer-type content, and 90% news aggregated. And that's where we've gone. And so that's where we are today. And now we're starting to mix in more direct-to-cameras and explainer content from creators and different voices for a whole other host of reasons. But you asked about how we differentiate from platform to platform. One thing that we have done that I think with our TikTok strategy, recognizing that because we're a brand, we can act like a brand. It's given us a little bit more freedom and creativity to cross-purpose content. So we could post content from Instagram to TikTok. And so one thing that we do is every single piece of content that goes on Instagram goes on TikTok, but not every piece of content that goes on TikTok goes on Instagram, for example.
Interesting.
And so because on TikTok, our strategy is more. I don't ascribe to the strategy that you need to like post something and then wait an hour before you post something else. We just fire hose all day long. We do the same thing on Instagram, same thing on Facebook. And so that means that we can translate really highly branded Instagram content into a platform like TikTok that is, in theory, less branded and see really impressive results. Some of our top performing pieces of TikTok content is not video. It is either a still graphic on a vertical screen, or it is a carousel of 2 or 3, sometimes as many as 5 to 6 slides. And so that has helped inform our strategy because we know that we can spend more time making Instagram content because it's going to perform well on TikTok. Occasionally, there are times where there's content that we know doesn't necessarily have to go on Instagram or doesn't have to go on Facebook, but should go on TikTok. And sometimes that's more raw, rough and dirty content, like somebody's at a rally and grabs a quick shot. We'll throw it up on TikTok with an in-app headline, something we added and edited right in TikTok. That's another thing that we do that I think a lot of other news brands do not, which is we make a decent amount of our content right in the platform itself. We're not using a third-party editing app. Sometimes we are for Instagram content, but for TikTok, we're not using a third-party editing app. We're not using Premiere. We're not going into Canva. We're uploading a raw video right to the platform and doing all of the things we need to do to it right in that app.
Even if it's going to go in other places, or that's for the pieces that are
that's
only
just
going
for the pieces
TikTok?
that are going to go on TikTok.
You're not like creating it 3 times. You're creating it once if it's just gone there. Okay, got it.
That's right. If it's just going there, it's going to be created on that platform. There are times where we'll create content that's going to go on both platforms or all 3 platforms, but they're in different containers. So, for example, if it is a clip of, I think yesterday we put out a clip of John Ossoff grilling Russ Vaughn, the OMB director.
Yep.
And so that clip was on TikTok, put up on TikTok raw. It was added to the app. We added a headline on that on the app, clipped it on the app, and then published it. And it did very well. I don't know what it's at right now, but it's probably on its way to 1 million views. On Instagram, on the other hand, we put that clip in an editing software, put a branded headline on it with the yellow bar, put the logo on it, did some captions, because that platform, people expect a little bit more on that platform. They expect a little bit more effort, I think. And so that's how we kind of delineate between the two. But by and large, most of the content that goes on Instagram goes right onto TikTok without thinking about it any differently.
So you mentioned that like anything on Instagram is going to go on TikTok, but not necessarily the other way around. And it sounds like the big differentiation is like effort's not the right word, but like cleanliness. Like, so you'll do like an unbranded, casual, and then, but if you're putting out on Instagram, you're gonna like edit it, make it look right. Yeah, it's really interesting. That's my take too. TikTok has a very casual feel. I talk to my clients about that all the time. I'm like, it's a gift. You can just go on TikTok and make a video. It doesn't have to look good. Like, it doesn't matter. I get tons of views on like these like ugly videos that, like, as long as people care about the content and they're not distracted by the lighting or the sound. But a lot of people struggle with that. They're like, no, it's got to be perfect. I'm like, perfect's actually bad a lot of times. But that's really interesting, that differentiation. I think that's helpful. Do you know when a piece of content's going to fly, or like, are you caught off guard too?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm caught off guard occasionally, but yeah, I know when something comes across for approval, I'm like, that's gonna be a top performer today. And you can also tell within like the first couple of minutes of it being posted if it reaches certain benchmarks.
Yeah.
We know that if it reaches, let's say, 10,000 views on TikTok in the first 5 minutes, that probably will make its way to 1 million over the course of the day.
Interesting.
Sometimes that 1 million happens over the course of an hour, in which case, those times, that happened a lot in 2024, and it's been happening increasingly more so as the administration has been increasingly more, I don't know, disruptive. Involved
in the TikTok algorithm. Yeah, no, I'm seeing the same thing. My number is like, I'm like a tiny version, like, like not even a percent, but like I used to get much bigger numbers than I am today. I still have reach on there. I had a post blow up the other day, but like my numbers are just, I'm not hitting those like 6-digit videos regularly the way that I used to. That used to be like a monthly thing, and 5 digits was a couple times a week, and now it's just less. Like I'm still getting 1,000 to 1,500 on every video, and then the ones that blow up are just fewer and far between.
Yeah,
and I'm like a tiny version of that.
Sure. And one thing I've noticed, and I don't know, the TikTok algorithm kind of is a mystery to everybody, right? There isn't really a rhyme or reason to a lot of the things, but we can extrapolate based on years of experience now at this point of some rules that we think are important. And so sometimes if we have content that maybe isn't performing super well over the course of the first 2 hours, maybe it is under 15 or 20,000 views in the first 2 hours, we'll use that as an opportunity to be like, okay, let's look at that again. Do we need to pull that down, re-edit it somehow, do something different to it to give it some more juice? And often that works. We don't have to be precious about these things. We're the only ones that know whether a post is a success or not. So and now speaking to the social media managers out there, try more stuff. You're the only one that knows if it fails. Delete it, upload it again. The 200 people that liked it will probably come back and like it again, and you'll probably get, who knows, maybe 500,000 the next time. That's important. And I think trying stuff and failing at stuff is the only way to really hone how you do this thing. When we first started doing TikTok, generally all of our posts were terrible. Yeah. 0 views or 100 views here and there. We just kept at it and kept fine-tuning things until after about like 2 or 3 months into posting, we were like, okay, we know what our audience likes, we know what drives on this platform, let's double down on it and just keep cranking. More is more, especially on TikTok.
I mean, that's so interesting because I have the same thing again. It like remove some zeros, but like for me, I'll have videos that I'll put up, and it rarely happens, but it's like there seems to be a very specific kind of video it happens on for me. But I'll put it up and it'll get like 10 views in the first 10 minutes. I'm like, oh, this is going. There's no way, like it's dead. And I'll delete it, but I never repost it or recreate it because it's like, who cares? For me, I'm just like a solo creator. But y'all, will you always recreate it, or it's like no, sometimes didn't do well. Let's just delete it and move on with our day.
Yeah, sometimes we'll repost it or recreate it. We'll pick a new sound. Maybe we'll have the second slide of the carousel be the first slide instead. If it's a video, maybe we'll start it with a punchier section, move that to the front of the video, and then start it there. All of these kinds of tricks. Rarely do we delete something and then it doesn't go back up. We always try to make something. One thing that we have been doing increasingly so that has been a success is presenter-led content. And so this is we learned early on that we could be a brand and we didn't have to do presenter-led content. And so now it's like a luxury to be able to do it. And so what we've noticed in the last, since about January, our presenter-led content with the right editing has really been taking off and has been a lot of the times in our top performing pieces of content. And so it doesn't happen by accident. You know, there's a team of folks that are making this happen. We, for example, will never put out a presenter-led video that hasn't gone through the video editor first.
Okay.
Because the video editor will, of course, sometimes add captions and a logo and B-roll, but it's all of those things taken together that tells a compelling story. And so even internally, I don't call them direct to cameras. I don't even call them presenter leds. The word I increasingly use is monologues, because monologues are interesting. People know what a monologue is.
Sure.
We all have a fond memory of, like, you know, and for me, it's not even memory. It's a memory of watching a clip on YouTube of Murrow, or, you know, these great anchors telling these compelling, interesting stories with supporting evidence and, you know, graphic packages and all of these sorts of things. And so we're doing that on a micro level in a vertical video with so we have a national correspondent. His name is Cam Stevenson. He is our new national correspondent. He's moving from Arizona to DC. But something that he does is he creates weekly monologues, sometimes more than one a week, on a particular issue. And in that monologue, we will edit together maybe an interview he had that week, maybe some graphs that we found that were interesting, or unique reporting from one of our reporters or from another newsroom's reporters, to tell a cohesive story. And so we don't put out a clip of an interview Cam did. We couch that interview in an interesting monologue. And so that, I think, sets us apart in a way from some of our competitors, because they'll publish a raw clip with an interview, and the interview subject is maybe an expert, maybe an interesting topic, but because it kind of looks like a Zoom screen, or you know, it just isn't compelling for any number of reasons, it doesn't perform. And so what we found is, if we can put it inside of an interesting and compelling story in an interesting container with a compelling host, Cam, with music, with B-roll, with the logo, with captions, and make it look like a mini documentary, it performs really well. And so we've been doubling down on that strategy. And so every single thing that goes out the door generally looks like that. If we do an interview, it's put together in that kind of package.
That's super interesting. And I've seen those videos, but I'll have to rewatch them now with like that understanding of how you're approaching it. And it's funny because when you say monologue, to me, I think like Stephen Colbert and David Letterman, you know, like even that, like, you know, those are the parts of the show that's the only part of the show I'm tuning in for often. Right. It's like, I want to hear a smart, funny, in this case, person break down their stories. And like, you know, Seth Meyers doing a closer look. Like if he doesn't do a closer look, I'm not watching anything from Seth Meyers, you know, but he's taking one story and doing a deep dive into it with like bits and pieces like strewn in. So I think that's a really interesting way to think about it. And again, like that word really helps me connect with what you're saying. So that's like a helpful, like, presenter led does not connect with me either. Monologue is like, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. That makes total sense. Can you talk about a little bit more about your process for creating content? Like, are y'all just sitting and watching the news all day, Media Matters style, and looking for those moments? Or are you finding them from other people and like, oh, this just went viral online, let's grab it? Like, do y'all have like that warehouse of people just watching the news all day, every day? Because I've been in those rooms and they're terrible, awful places, but thank goodness for them, you know?
Sure. I wish it was a warehouse of people.
Media Matters has a warehouse.
I wish we had. So let me pull back the curtain a little bit on what our staffing looks like first, and then I'll answer kind of how so over the course of the 2024 election cycle, we had a very small team. It was 5 full-time staff on our national. The larger organization itself has between 80 and 90 full-time employees. So the 5 full-time national employees were responsible for growing the brand, maintaining the social and all that sort of thing. And so of those 5 folks, there was a managing director responsible for kind of keeping the trains running, managing the whole team. And at the time, his name's Kyle Tharp. Shout out to Kyle.
Friend of the pod, for sure. We love
Kyle. Shout out to Kyle. He's been on the pod. He writes a fantastic newsletter called Chaotic Era, which
everyone should subscribe if you're not. Yeah, for sure.
But he was the former author for What It's Worth. You should also subscribe to that. That still publishes with new authors under Courier's umbrella.
And he was a partner on the FYP. He's the one who brought me into the FYP based on like our mutual respect for what each other were doing. I'm a big fan of his, have been for a long time. So yeah.
So shout out to Kyle. So Kyle was the managing director. And then we had a smaller team, somebody who managed our newsletter program, somebody who managed our podcasts, and then a video editor, and myself. So our social team during the 2024 election was myself and our video editor. That was it. So we had one full-time social person plus a video editor during the 2024 election. So with that small team, we were managing, like you said in your intro, we pulled in 3 billion views over the course of the 2024 election cycle. So imagine what we could have done with the warehouse, I guess is my point. Currently, I'm thankful now to have a deputy. So we have a deputy, we still have the video editor, and then we have a small team of contractors that we have been working with. Some brilliant folks from that ran Kamala HQ, the TikTok and Instagram accounts. And so they've been helping us out as well. Shout out to them, Parker Butler and Lauren Cap. So our social team now, that means it's 5, me plus 4. And so what we're doing is constantly being online. Our brains are all totally mush. We're totally fried. For better or worse, we're using Twitter kind of as an assignment editor. One trend that we've noticed is content that goes viral on Twitter often doesn't go viral on Instagram or TikTok until the following day. And so if we can get there first on the same day that it's going viral on Twitter, and we have the luxury of not caring about Twitter, we don't have a meaningful presence on that platform aside from sharing, text-based type content, promoting our newsletters, promoting other content, but we don't create content specifically for Twitter, which means we can spend all of our time creating content on our priority platforms. And so we monitor Twitter all day long and use that as our assignment editor and create content for those other platforms, our priority platforms, from what's moving on Twitter. And so we supplement our Twitter content with, we're monitoring endless news wires, watching C-SPAN footage, looking at congressional hearings, seeing what's going on in the state level, being informed by our state newsrooms, all of those sorts of things. And so by and large, to answer your question, we're just consuming tons of media and trying to publish it as quickly as we're consuming.
Again, I am a micro version, like in the smallest possible version, but that also for at least the first year, my entire TikTok strategy that helped me blow up. I got like millions of views in a year just doing it myself, like on the side of all my other stuff. I would just go on Twitter, see what was trending, and share it on TikTok because everybody on TikTok was interested, but nobody knew. And I say that without any condescension, like nothing, like they're on TikTok. They don't want to be on the hellscape that is Twitter. I was there anyway. I was like, oh, here's an interesting story that I bet nobody's heard. And sure enough, like millions of views in a year, just doing it myself, 20 minutes a day. So it's interesting to hear, like y'all essentially found the nutrition, like, right? Like there's like a lag between Twitter and that, and you're using it. So it's super interesting that that's still working for you. Cause I am like actively, I still spend a ton of time online, as you can imagine. I'm trying to spend less time on Twitter. It's like the struggle these days. But no, that's super interesting. So we talked earlier about how y'all have like sub brands, if you will, or, like other brands in local states, including one that I'm a big fan of here in Wisconsin called Up North News. I'm a big fan of them. Are you involved with them, or is that like completely separate as like you're the national, you're involved in national and the statewide things are brands are all doing their own thing?
Sure. No, we're all under the same umbrella. We all share the same support staff. Our HR is the local team of HR, and our CEO is the CEO for the whole organization.
Karen? Yeah, she's crushing.
And so we have, small. Our team is smaller. We work as an independent kind of newsroom of the state newsrooms, but there's tons of collaboration. We are working together right now to kind of standardize some of the brand assets, some of the design. So you're going to start noticing some of the design on our state sides are going to be looking a little bit more like the national side, not because that they should be, but just because we know that kind of content performs better. And so they're taking learnings from the national and applying it to the state. So we work really closely together.
Okay.
One thing that the state side of our shop is doing that's interesting, and I think that they're pioneering for newsrooms across the country, is they're leading a product first approach, meaning most of the folks that work in editorial on the state side are owning some kind of product. They're going to own a newsletter, they're going to start a podcast, they're going to do a YouTube show. And what that means is they are becoming the talent. And so we are lifting up the talent from our state newsrooms. And in many of our states, our newsrooms, our digital first, social first newsrooms are some of the largest digital brands in those states. whether it's Up North News or the Gander in Michigan or the Keystone in Pennsylvania. We're creating content engaging with audiences of rival size of any other legacy brand in those states. And so with our new product-based approach, it means that we're empowering our reporters to be the creators. Like I talked about earlier, there isn't really a delineation between social strategy and editorial strategy. They should be one and the same. And so that's what we're doing. We're empowering those reporters to own products, to figure out how they should market them, to figure out how they could, in some cases, monetize them. And I think it's an interesting approach for local news at a time when, local newsrooms across the country are folding up, not a Courier, expanding and being more thoughtful.
You just opened up in Nevada, right?
That's right.
Yeah, exciting.
A new newsroom in Texas.
Yeah, soon. I saw that. Very cool. Are there any campaigns or elected officials you think are doing good social media right now?
Great question. We're taping this 2 days after Mandami has become the Democratic nominee for New York City. So obviously that campaign ignited something in people inside of the progressive community, inside of the campaign ecosystem. And so, yeah, of course, that was incredible digital. There's incredible lessons to be learned. And I am, unlike too many others, I am waiting to hear from the folks who actually ran the campaign to tell us what the lessons are. We can't just extrapolate lessons as outside observers. We really, I want to hear from the experts. There are some brilliant minds behind that campaign, and I'm waiting to hear what they have to say.
The invite has already been sent. If they get back to me, you'll hear them on the phone. I would love to talk to the folks at Melting Solids who ran his video campaign. But I agree, like it's very easy to be like, oh, this is what worked. It's like you don't really know what worked until you like understand it internally, right?
Right. We have no idea. I suspect what actually worked. I mean, aside from a messaging perspective, I assume what actually worked is connecting with people. The same way Donald Trump was elected, connecting with people's economic woes and figuring out how to try to solve them in meaningful ways, whether you agree with them or not. That's, I think, what Zorhan was able to accomplish. And pair that with an impressive digital strategy, it was a slam dunk. I mean, the walking and talking videos, we know that exudes youth and optimism and feels real and raw and gritty. And so that was impressive to me. Another unsuspected bright spot, I think, in the digital space lately, and this is owed to, I think, another Kamala HQ alum, is Gavin Newsom's new TikTok strategy. It's been going really well. Whether you love or hate the guy, he has an impressive strategy on TikTok that has been racking up views, growing his audience, introducing him to new and interesting kind of voters across the country, especially as he, I assume, eyes the 2028 race. One thing that's been interesting to me about his TikTok presence is I think his team has learned the lessons of a brand, which is most of his content on TikTok doesn't involve him at all. It's just, it's content that can be made outside of the principal, which gives you and your digital team tons of freedom to create content because you don't need to wait for this week's digital time. Principals like a governor of the biggest state in the union or a president in the White House, they have to wait for Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday for their hour or 90 minutes of digital time. Sometimes that means they have to waste the digital time on a video message for a Democratic Party dinner in Iowa, or wishing the undersecretary of whatever happy birthday. And so that means that you have less time with your principal. And so if you can find interesting ways to elevate your principal with content that has nothing to do with their voice or their likeness, I'm thinking tweets, I'm thinking graphics, I'm thinking breaking news cards, I'm thinking dragging Donald Trump, dragging other nefarious caricatures in your own states. That's the content that moves and grows audiences. And that means that your principal will benefit from that audience and all of that content when you do get time with them, when you do create a piece of content that's going to be meaningful. And I think that's been interesting to see Newsom's team understand, learn, and implement.
That's really interesting. I mean, during like when I was writing the FYP, I was like really digging into the presidential campaigns on TikTok, and there was such a big distinction between like the Kamala Harris account and the Kamala HQ account. And prior to Kamala, they were Biden HQ, but those got flipped. But yeah, also like Kamala was rarely in the Kamala HQ account content because it wasn't about her. It was about the movement she was building. It was about the brand. It was about the community. And sometimes she might make a cameo, but she was almost never speaking to the camera. Whereas at Kamala Harris, like it was her talking to the camera, her walking down the stairs, her giving a speech. And it makes sense that the folks behind that like learned a lot of lessons. And unfortunately, the Trump campaign also learned a lot of lessons from that because we saw like the Donald Trump campaign had massive numbers, but rarely shared. And then all of a sudden, Trump HQ, I don't think that's what they called it, but was getting just racking up massive numbers doing the like grossest version of their same thing on the right. So, I mean, it was like gross to watch because it was so manipulative and like just outright misogynistic and racist and lying often, but like good content from the algorithm perspective, clearly. So talk about your specific Facebook strategy. Does it deviate from TikTok and Instagram, or it's like the stuff that's working on Insta is working on Facebook as well?
So one thing that we've noticed, and this has been since about the start of the new year, is since Facebook lifted its content restrictions on political content, Facebook has been one of our fastest growing platforms. We started the year with less than 20,000 followers on that platform, and we are now, I think as of today, maybe close to 400,000 over the course of just a number of months. And so we were able to capture a lot of that attention just by cross-posting from Instagram. We haven't really, until recently, been posting in any meaningfully specific way onto Facebook. We've just been repurposing Instagram content just through the cross post toggle. And so lately we have been focusing more on specific kinds of Facebook content, whether it is, posting a status or, using some, for my favorite term is boomer core emojis or that kind of vernacular on that platform, because that's who we know is engaging with our content. And so if we can create basically the same content with the same message, but in interesting ways that would move on that platform, that's something that we've been doubling down on. And so it's been weird to report out on our numbers. It used to just be Instagram and TikTok, but now week over week, I'm adding Facebook into the mix. And the last few weeks in particular, our content on our top performing pieces of content on Facebook have been better than our top performing pieces of content on Instagram.
Better as far as reach and engagement, you mean?
As far as reach and engagement.
Better on Facebook than Instagram and TikTok?
Yeah.
Whoa. I work in electoral politics, a lot of down ballot candidates, some statewide. Like I don't sleep on Facebook. I don't use it much personally. I'm in it all the damn time for my clients. And I know because that's where the voters are. Like, older folks are voting, older folks are on Facebook. But I definitely don't see that type of content. Like Facebook is mostly, I mean, there's so much AI slop on there and like whatnot. So that's really like I see all stuff constantly on Instagram and TikTok. But I don't see you on Facebook. Maybe I don't even follow you on Facebook. I don't know. I never bothered to, I guess. I'll have to go check it out. But that's so interesting. And I think that to me right there is a huge lesson for campaigns is like, have a Facebook strategy, even if it's as simple as just like posting natively. I saw somebody say recently they found that if you use those like, like if you use the background graphic where you're posting right in there,
that's what I'm talking about.
Crushing right now. Yeah,
was the word I was using. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So don't like type it in. Like use one of the. How would you describe that? I'm saying it awkwardly.
So for all of the digital directors out there, you literally go to Facebook.com, go to your page, type a status. And then along the bottom of the bar where you
like in the left, right?
Status looks like you can pick color, you can pick the font color. Sometimes you can do a pattern. The more, the less aesthetically pleasing it looks, the better it will perform. Use the pink, use the purple, use the red. Courier, we have a very strict brand. We use black and yellow, but not Facebook free for all. Yeah.
So the uglier the better. That's so interesting.
The uglier the better.
Facebook is so weird, man.
So that's another piece of advice because campaigns often start with a Facebook page, they start with an Instagram page, sometimes a Twitter page. Spend some time on Facebook, figure out what's working on that platform. You can become a real micro influencer on that platform, especially in your local community, without a ton of heavy lifting. One other thing that I think is interesting that we're just starting to do, that used to be big, and then again, Facebook kind of went away for a while, and now it's back, is content seeding in like-minded, mission-aligned groups. So that's the best way to discover new audiences, is to find a group of a topic of a similar thing, whether it is, Pantsuit Nation is still going strong.
Rocking,
find groups like that and start posting your content in there, not in a self-promotional way, but because the content is interesting, and that audience will find it interesting too. Post that there, and then it's a quick way to grow your audience and get more engagements.
And are you reaching out asking for permission, or you're just posting in a way that doesn't feel spammy and you're just going
that's right.
for it?
Yeah,
cool.
just post in a thoughtful, meaningful way. And sometimes when you can, connect with the moderator and let them know that you're there and that you want to be a thoughtful part of the community. But yeah, by and large, the content's interesting and it speaks for itself.
This has been super interesting. Yeah, that is very interesting to me to hear, and I will definitely have to go give y'all another look on Facebook. I'll get to enjoy your content on even more platforms. So I'm excited about that. I am curious, like, you brought this up, and I think you already sort of answered the question there, but I'll give you another bite at the apple. What do you think campaigns, especially small ones who can't afford Kamala HQ staffers on their team, what can they learn from your success? Like, how can they do better at social based on the lessons that you've charted out these last couple of years?
Yeah, that's a great question. One thing is clear is that you can accomplish a great deal with a very small team. Most campaigns, when they start out, they probably don't hire a director for a few months anyways, until fundraising kind of kicks off.
That is my experience as a digital person.
Yeah, and whether they start with a digital person or not,
sure.
Obviously you should start with a digital person, but they just don't have the resources for that.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, there are resources out there. There are endless numbers of hands-on kind of consultancies that have been popping up in recent months, and even in the last year or so, of folks who have done this work and are open and willing to contract with anybody for a pretty sizable or pretty small budget to make an impact. So that's one thing. One is don't wait for digital, especially if you're going to launch a campaign. The day you launch your campaign is, until the debate, the day that you're going to get the most attention. And so if you're not set up to capture that attention in a meaningful way, whether it is through donations or volunteers or whatever, you're already, you're starting at a deficit. And so figure out a way to make digital work from the jump. You can do it on the cheap, and you can do it with a small staff. All of the digital directors out there are banging their heads against the wall because they're saying, no, we want more staff. Of course you want more staff. You should have more staff. It should be the biggest department in your campaign, but you can accomplish a great deal with small strengths. The next is you don't have to overthink the platform by platform approach. Like I said, everything that goes on Instagram goes on TikTok. There are things that you should do differently on TikTok, but we've talked about it throughout this podcast about how there are ways to double dip and get the most bang for your buck. So those are the couple of things I think I would have advice for campaigns on. The other is just talk to people you think are smarter than you. I have been having tons of conversations recently with folks, digital practitioners in this space. We get on the phone for half an hour, 40 minutes, and just pick each other's brains. What's working, what's not, air your frustrations, let's hear them all. So I think that's important, whether you're a campaign manager who doesn't have time or resources yet to hire a digital director, or you're a digital director. Reach out to folks in this space. Reach out to me, hell, and talk to me. Let's figure out how we can do this thing together. I think there are endless opportunities out there, and folks just want to help. And so it doesn't always have to be an exchange of resources. Sometimes it's just a half an hour, and that might be enough to jumpstart a new idea or motivate you to try something new. I think that would be my biggest advice, is that you just don't get what you don't ask for.
I love it. I was going to ask you what's one thing folks can take away from the conversation, but I feel like that might be it, is have conversations with your colleagues, brainstorm, and also spend a ton of time online. Any other single takeaway? Exactly. Do it for the cause, y'all. Come on.
For the cause. Break your brain and more is more. Yeah.
More is more. Okay. Because I think a lot of folks are afraid. They think oh, I already did a post today. I should stop. You said you're fire hosing it. You have no problem. Just especially Facebook is one place where I've seen that you can overpost, but that was years ago. That's not true anymore. There's no such thing.
Yeah, that's not true. More is more. campaigns in smaller communities with smaller account and smaller audiences have to think a little bit more about that. We have the luxury of being a national brand. We're talking to the whole of the country, and so we can firehose it. But if I was a newsroom, I live in Manlius, New York. If I was a newsroom just for Manlius, New York, I would have to, I think, reduce the amount of times we're posting in a day, because there's only so many people in this audience. How many times could I?
Right.
So there are considerations, but by and large, more is more, especially on a platform like TikTok.
Okay. And how can folks keep in touch with you moving forward? Should they just follow at Courier Newsroom, or you want to send them to any of your channels?
Yeah, follow at Courier Newsroom on all platforms. Like and subscribe across the board. Go to couriernewsroom.org, which is our new Substack hub. I would love for everybody to subscribe to all our newsletters. Find us on YouTube at Courier HQ on YouTube. We're doing some cool stuff there. Lots of stuff has not launched yet on that platform. And so if you subscribe now, you'll be among the first to see it. And then to follow me, well, what am I on? I'm on Instagram at rc.demezzo, on Twitter at rcdemezzo. Hit me up on LinkedIn. We talked earlier about Twitter being our assignment editor. It used to be my favorite platform.
Sure.
I was fiend on that platform, and I'm in need of a new favorite. So let me know yours.
I hear it. I'll have links to all that stuff in the show notes, along with some of the other things we talked about. Thank you so much for coming in. And I mean, so much. This was like a great conversation. I feel like I learned a lot, and I, A, live on the platforms the way you do, and B, I consume so much of your content, and I still feel like I took a lot away from this. So for folks who like kind of know who Courier Newsroom is, I hope this was very valuable for y'all. But yeah, tell your friends, y'all. Courier Newsroom is the left's answer to our content desert that the left has. The Ben Shapiro of the left, except with shame, and with honesty and whatnot. So yeah, tell your friends. I don't know if that's a compliment, Ben Shapiro of the left, but it's certainly intended as one.
I'm going to take it as one, and I appreciate it.
Okay, cool. Thanks so much. And we'll see you online.
That does it for another episode of Hello Merge Tag. Thanks so much for listening. Know anyone who might appreciate this podcast? Please share it with them today. Find all episodes at hellomergetag.com or wherever you stream podcasts. Have questions or want to connect? Drop us a line at hello@reverbalcommunications.com. Until next time, keep on telling your story.